This is Tash, and you're listening to Season 2 of the Imperfect Activist podcast, coming at you via the Be the Change Media Network. The Imperfect Activist is a space where I, a young activist, talk to other youth activists about the ways they're trying to make the world a better place, and using their creativity to tackle the injustices facing our generation, whilst also just trying to survive and thrive on a planet that's, well, quite literally on fire. In this episode of The Imperfect Activist, I talked to Beth Rice. Beth is a project manager in cancer trial research, a pageant queen, and an avid lover of nature and travelling. In the past 10 years, Beth has battled with her climate anxiety and frustration at not learning more about climate issues at school. Pageantry launched Beth into action, and since entering her first beauty pageant in 2021, Beth has launched her own social justice project, Climate Whispers, which teaches young people about climate change and social justice through workshops. Beth has had the opportunity to travel to Ghana to work with young leaders and attended the United Nations COP28 conference as an advocate for climate education. Beth loves to talk about how a platform like Pageantry can be a force for change and hopes to inspire others to advocate for climate issues and pursue their passions, even in unconventional ways.
We don't need 100 perfect activists, but millions of imperfect ones.
Young people, well, we're the future. We've got everything to fight for. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for joining. I'd first love to ask you, Beth, mainly what, for people listening who might not know about you, would you give us a little intro, bit of an overview of you and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Hi Tash, thank you for having me on. So my day job by day, I say that I'm a project manager in medical research. So I work on cancer drugs and their development. That's my day job. But about 6 years ago, I started to think more about the environment and realised the way that I was living was not great for our climate, and so started to make change. And it's been very, very slow over the years, which is why I love the concept of this podcast, because when we know better, we do better, and we're constantly learning and trying to be better. But so my journey really started through pageantry, and I started in pageants in 2021. I was working, obviously I'd worked through COVID, and I'd worked in a tech distribution company. It sort of ended, when you fall into jobs and you think, actually this isn't my passion at all, and was burnt out, was working all hours. Through lockdown, all I did was work. I didn't do anything else. You couldn't do anything else, but I just chose to work through every hour of every day possible. And I remember sitting at my desk one day and just thinking, there must be more than this, to life, because I had no work-life balance. And so I decided to enter a beauty pageant. And I guess for people listening, if you've ever seen any films, I'd say that gives a pretty good impression of what a beauty pageant competition is. I really had no idea what I was entering. I'd seen one that I'd always wanted to do. My parents hadn't let me enter one when I was younger. And I thought, I'm 26 now, I can make my own decisions. So I entered, and I think the great thing about pageantry is that it makes you question who you are as a person, and you really have to know yourself well, because you basically have to interview and tell everyone who you are. And so you have to know who you are, but you also have to know what you're passionate about. And pageantry is a place, a lot of the pageants are about advocacy, and they're about having some sort of platform to speak about an issue. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be climate related. Like the current Miss Great Britain, she's talking about bereavement leave and changing the laws around bereavement leave. So it's just what's passionate to you. And I sort of sat there and I thought, what do I care about? And at the time I was working with some work parties and volunteering with some local conservation groups, and I was doing some LGBTQ plus stuff and stuff with Macmillan, and I just had loads of different little things. And then I found environmental pageants, and that's when everything sort of took off. So Tash and I know you're probably going to come on to this, but Tash and I know each other through my project Climate Whispers, which is around the time 2022 that I started going into schools. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But
yeah, no, that sounds great. No, it's great to hear how it all started for you as well, because I didn't fully know all of that myself, and I definitely didn't know much about pageantry until I met you as well. Like, I remember starting like following you online and like seeing that you did all of that and being like, whoa, like that's a whole world that I did not know about. And yeah, I think it's really cool, like how people in that world kind of use those skills and those passions and use that platform to kind of speak on issues they're passionate about. And I think that's really cool, and I think a lot of people don't know about that. But yeah, obviously I know you a bit more from like Climate Whispers, and how do you think like that came about then after you kind of started the pageantry? Where did that kind of thinking about schools and kind of the next generation kind of lead? How did that kind of come from those two things?
Yeah, so I think the reality of climate change had been in my mind for quite a few years before I did anything about it. I think we're lucky enough in this country that often you can live life without worrying about it. And when I decided that actually this was a real passion of mine and I wanted to pursue and do some good for the environment, I was just frustrated, I think, that I hadn't learned more in school, that it hadn't been... I think when I woke up to the problems that are going on in the world, I thought, oh, why have we not learned about this? And that's when I started to do workshops, and I started with the science. So originally my workshops were called The Climate Scientist, and that was about trying to encourage young people to pursue climate science and teach climate science. And then I kind of came to the realization that actually the things that are really propagating climate change, yes, okay, we need to know the science and where we are, but actually we need to tackle the systems around it that are creating the problem, as you know, Tash, you know very well. So that's where Climate Whispers came about, and I sort of changed the workshop. And now it's really, if I run through the workshop, we start with a little bit of the science, just so that and this is to, I should say, age 10, 11, like year 6, year 7, year 8, that kind of age in UK schools. And we start with the science. Then we talk about climate justice, and they have to guess like what global north and global south and which countries which, so that we do a little fun thing there. And then we talk about climate anxiety, and actually just trying to get young people to put a word to an emotion, rather than just saying sad. Like there's so many things within sad, like shame, guilt, other things that people are feeling, grief, we talk about. And then we go on, we talk about the Philippines, we talk about typhoons, and we watch this video. And then we do creative writing. So it ends with they write a postcard. They can write to whoever they like about whatever they like, but it has to include a way that they feel about climate change and something they want to do to help. So so a lot of my favorite ones are the young people that write to a tree or a bush. They're my favorite ones of nature that they're appreciating. I love it. But yeah, we get all of it. I mean, we will not mention Trump or Putin in the whole of the workshop, and then people will write to them, and then you get people writing to their future selves. Sort of they're more hypothetical. Did we do anything? Like they're the like poetic ones, I often think. And so that's the workshop. But yeah, that's kind of how it evolved, and it's trying to get young people to make the connection between the oppressive systems, and I sometimes think, is this too much for a 10-year-old that I'm teaching, where I'm really talking about these systems and how that's led to propagate. We talk about greed and we talk about everything. So yeah, and it's really interesting because other stuff comes up in the session. You never know what's going to come up, but yeah, so you'll end up on fast fashion and girls talking about the clothes they want to buy, and you know, it all goes round in different. Meat eating always comes up. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear what young people have to say, and they're so switched on, and they may not fully comprehend everything. Like in the Ukraine war, they may not fully comprehend everything, but they know what's happening, and they can write about it, which is great. Write something. Yeah.
I think it's so cool. And I think you're so right, like young people, they, you know, have their mind of their own, don't they? And they actually know a lot more than we think they do. And I think, I love how you just kind of give them the space to kind of just articulate that, right? And in a creative way as well, that's not all facts and figures. And like, I think we're both creatives in that way, aren't we? I don't think we need to be just going hard at the science all the time. I think it's often about how we feel about these things, and I don't think there's a lot of space for those moments and those conversations is there. And it's partly why I kind of started this podcast as well, is that idea of just like these things are actually really tough and really hard to think about, especially while we're all just trying to get on and live our lives as well, right? And pay the bills, pay the rent, and you know, thinking about those things, it's a lot, isn't it? And I guess I'd be interested to know how you kind of close those spaces with those young people and kind of leave those emotions there, because I don't know how long you work with them for, or how does that work?
However long I get is the answer from the school. It's, you know, it's tricky, and I'm not sure that's one of the things I really question. Am I having these conversations correctly? And I think they're really important conversations, because I think as well our teachers don't have as much autonomy necessarily. I don't work for the school, so they can't I don't know, do anything about me. If I talk about something that actually they think, oh no, we don't like that, or maybe I've never been told that anything I say and do is offensive to anybody, but you just never know how people will take things. And teachers are tired, they've got so much going on. I was listening to something the other day about giving a balanced view, particularly of British history. Like, we're taught to teach British history, if not all of it, but some of the parts that we do teach, with a very, I always think sometimes a positive view, and actually there's so many negative. And it's the teachers that I think have a passion for it and are brave enough to include things and have the time, make the effort and have the time and energy to include it. That's the only way young people are going to learn about things and the connection between everything. But it's really difficult. And I think I was listening to something the other day about managing emotions and climate anxiety. I think it's really tricky, especially they were talking about people. So you got fight, flight and freeze, and it has to be one of those three, because it is a genuine threat. So you can't just be like, well, I don't feel any, I don't care anything, because it is a threat. So it has to be some sort of fight response. And they were talking about how we live in a world, things are getting harder. I think, particularly in this country, if you're worrying about where your next meal is coming from, you are in the freeze camp, because you can't think about anything else apart from where that meal's coming from. You don't have time to even comprehend a lot of the problems that are going on in the world. But on the other side, you also get people in the freeze camp that know so much about climate change, and they're trying to do as much as they can, and they get to a point where they don't want to live properly because they know everything has a footprint, and so they're kind of in this freeze doomy space, can't do anything. So it's really interesting. And I think the main thing I've learned is you have to share your own emotions. So even if they're not sharing much with me, like every time I put this video on about the Philippines, I get teary. And the kids can see that, like I've watched this 100 times. I still cry every time. And I tell them what I'm feeling. And I think sometimes they just want adults to be real with them on the truth. If they ask a question about Trump, I'll give them my opinion. And I just think sometimes they might not get that from, or feel that they can ask. For these sessions, I try and make it as open as possible. I don't want these kids to be bullied because they share a genuine emotion in the class. So I'm really conscious. Like, I don't know how, you know, how easy these conversations are for these young people. So yeah, I don't think I've quite got it down, Tash, but I do my best.
No, I think it's really cool. But yeah, I hear that, like how hard that must be to be an outsider as well in that space, maybe, you know, and to have to be saying things that maybe not everybody else is saying to these young people as well, right? And yeah, that feels quite radical. And yeah, I guess I'd love to ask you, because I like to ask people this in terms of radicalness, like, and we talk a lot about it. This is called activist, as in this word in this podcast, and I have a lot of feelings around that word and like what that means and what we associate with the word activist and radical, because I think a lot of people would say that makes you quite radical, right? Going into these spaces, going into these schools and saying things that maybe some people might not want you saying, I don't know. But would you call yourself an activist, and how does that feel for you, sitting within that like world? Yeah.
Do you know, I feel like I'm a soft activist, and I would class you as like a hard activist.
Okay.
Because with a lot of my pageant stuff, you know, there's always, you know, good and bad to it. I think it really shines a light on, at the moment I'm Miss Scuba UK, so we're talking about marine conservation, and I think it really highlights certain issues. But at the same time, it does stop me joining, you know, a march. It does stop me going out with a placard and being what I would call a hard activist, like you would imagine if you were to see a picture of an activist. Oh yeah, that's an activist. But activism is something that it's one of the first things I talk about in my sessions in Climate Whispers, and I ask young people, and they can't tell me what an activist is most of the time. They've never come across that. It doesn't mean much to them. They think it's someone who's just active. I'm kind of like, yes, it is, but not in like an exercise way, which is usually what they're thinking. And so for me, I think, you know, if I step away from the pageant space, I will probably become more of what I'll call a hard activist. But I just don't think it's that radical to me, what we do. I just, you know, for me, I just think we're fighting for equality and fairness, and for everyone to have what they need to survive. And I don't think that's radical at all. But it is seen that way, I think, sometimes. And I met a lovely, she was a teacher, I think she was retired now, and she said, I just don't care anymore. Like, if you think this is radical, it's not. This is what young people need to know. And she was talking about you know, different things within British history when she said that, and I think she's absolutely right. I don't, you know, if we pretend it's radical, we just hide from it. And we shouldn't be hiding. We should be, you know, taking action on it.
It was a bit of a mean question in a way, because I don't think it's radical either. I just think, I'm getting a bit sick of how things are framed as radical, right? And these things, and I think a lot about, because we met on this program with this charity called In Place of War, where we spoke about different projects, and you spoke about Climate Whispers in Parliament, which was a really cool opportunity. And we, through this program, we had different mentors, didn't we? And I was really privileged to be mentored by a guy called Dan Glass, who is part of kind of the ACT UP movement. And one of the biggest things I took away from that program was him telling me that I'm not radical, and, you know, was talking about quite freely about how we feel about the climate crisis and all of these things, and, you know, being invited to bring those thoughts to that space in Parliament, and, you know, you're bringing those thoughts to spaces that don't often have those thoughts as well, be it schools, be it pageants, things like that. And for him to be like, like you need to stop saying that. You need to stop saying that you're radical, because also, like, it has that negative connotations, doesn't it? And like, I don't think that. And I think everybody is an activist in some way, and I think it's so interesting how you frame it as a soft and hard activist. I don't think I've ever heard that, actually. I'll take that. I mean, that's an interesting way you call it, because you have these people that look like activists with a placard or whatnot, which I feel like I often do on social media, or often at a protest or something, but then there's those people kind of making change from the inside or doing things a bit differently. I guess in a similar vein, I'd love to ask a bit about where you feel like the most kind of barriers or friction you kind of come up against in your work, like things that, I think you've spoken about it a bit, about like being in schools and things like that, but I wonder whether things like doing those things within this kind of cost of living crisis, where we got a bit of a funding crisis within the arts, how that kind of is affecting you like right now?
I think the scariest thing for me, I'm only one woman, and my mission, I think for me, is we need to improve our national curriculum. And I was listening to a wonderful talk the other day, is the way that we accelerate things like going from the Circle Line to the Elizabeth Line is the way that we need to accelerate everything, including our curriculum. I thought that was a wonderful analogy. We need to Elizabeth Line the curriculum and include a lot more about climate. And, in a recent review, they're not adding anything, but they acknowledge that, like, getting young people into nature, being solution based in the teaching, and that green skills is like one of the top 5 skills that young people need to learn. So it's like, we know the importance of it, but we're not gonna put the funding in and implement the changes in curriculum that we will need. And I think the scariest thing for me is the thought of reform getting power across the UK, because when we've seen where they have positions, they're immediately taking funding out of education, and particularly in like climate, and I think they will change the curriculum to make it worse than it already is. That's why I almost feel like, okay, I need to do as much as I can in as many areas as I can, so as like a little a quiet rebel. That's my other phrase, Tash. If you like soft and hard activist, quiet rebel is like, I might not openly speak about reform on a day-to-day basis, but quietly rebelling.
yeah no, I love that. We need the quiet rebels. No, it's great. I think I've spoken to you before, but I was part of a campaign called Teach the Future when I was in uni for a couple of years, which was kind of a movement that came from the You Strike for Climate movement. And we were kind of campaigning for a big kind of curriculum change in terms of adding climate education to the curriculum across all subjects, not just science. At the time I was involved, this was the time when they brought in a natural history, geography, GCSE, and that felt like great, but it felt like a very much like plaster on the whole situation. Like, that's not enough. We need to be talking about climate in every subject. Like, it was a bit like, here you go, we've done it. And it was a bit like, that's good, but it's not good enough. And
they still haven't put it in, Tash. Still doesn't properly exist yet. No.
I didn't know where that was at. Well, I remember them being like, launching this and making a big statement about it, and it being like this big wow thing, and we were like, wow, but okay, sure.
When they launch it, I plan to do it. I want to see what's in it. I'm gonna get a GCSE in my 30s.
No, I
just for fun.
Why not? I'd be interested. What are they saying in it? I'd be interested to know. And it also needs to be better. And I love that sentiment of like the quiet rebel, because I think we need all of those people in all those different places. And I think that's what we mean by being an imperfect activist, is like doing what we can and using our skills in different places. And I guess in that vein, to wrap us up, I always love to ask, just to close, like, is there anything you would say to someone who maybe wouldn't frame themselves as this activist, a hard activist or soft activist, and is there anything you but they want to make change, they feel like quite scared by these big kind of things that are happening in the world? What would be something you would say to them?
For me, I think I found my thing through understanding myself better and outlining strengths, my values and my passions. And I think you can't do everything. There's so many things within climate movement, other movements, whatever we're talking about. And I think it's just finding your strong point. Like, I love teaching young people. I didn't become a teacher, but I love doing it. I think I'm reasonably good at it, and I'm passionate about environmental issues, and my values are really about fairness and justice. And so it all makes sense that I would then go into schools and talk not just schools, but to speak to young people and do this work. And so I think everybody's probably got something in them, a passion project. And I'm the biggest procrastinator, so I fully understand if people want to make change and I don't fully have the answer. But yeah, it's that whole cost of inaction, you know, and you don't want to look back at life and think, oh, I wish I'd started something. Because even though you may think, oh, well, you know, I've only been into this many schools or spoken to this many children, I have to remember that it's still an impact. Sometimes I look at my work and I think, oh, I wish I could do more. I wish I could do bigger. Or I wish, you know, and just doing something is enough. And I think sometimes we are taught to keep going. I mean, it's part of our society, isn't it? Just work harder, just do more.
Yeah.
And having your own thing, even if it's just, I've just started a vegetable patch in the garden. Just something that you think, this is my little passion project. This is what I'm going to focus on, and just let it grow and see where it takes you. Because for me, I've been to COP, I've met you, Tash. Like, honestly, if I hadn't joined pageants and I hadn't started this work, my life would be so different. So you just never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's such a good sentence to end on, because I think that's why we're here, because we just want to do something. And I feel like sometimes we're often like passed the mic and told to kind of give everyone all the answers, and like we don't have them, but it's just about doing something. And I fully like relate to that, you know, not wanting to look back and feel like I could have done a bit more, or could have done something and I didn't. I feel that a lot. So yeah, amazing.
They should write a letter to their future self, asking, what did you do about climate change, and then pin it up on the wall and look at it every day and go, oh, what did I do? What would I say to myself in 10 years time? No,
go for climate whispers workshops. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I'm just joking. I don't know what the answer is.
No, I don't think we do, but I think that's okay. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Imperfect Activist. I hope you enjoyed our chats. If you got this far, please give us a like and a download on whatever platform you're on. And you can follow us over on Instagram at The Imperfect Activist and at Be The Change Media across all social media platforms. I've been Tash, a youth climate justice activist and creative, a teenage youth striker turned NGO worker from Devon. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you'll join us in becoming an imperfect activist too. The world needs you. Till next time.